What if I told you that a single, well-placed feeling of guilt could turn maybe later into yes, right now? Imagine being in a tense office scene where a colleague hesitates, then hands over a key project after a quick, charged exchange. You've likely been in situations where you wished you could turn a no into a yes, or a maybe into a definite yes, right now. Perhaps you've seen it happen in everyday moments. A friend refusing a favor, a partner ignoring a request, a boss delaying a decision. Stick around and I reveal the psychological secret behind that feeling and how to wield it responsibly to get what you really want. Let me share a personal anecdote with you. I once found myself in a situation where I really needed a favor from a colleague, but they were hesitant to help. I remembered a time when I had helped them out, and I gently reminded them of that.
It wasn't about forcing them to return the favor, but about reminding them of the mutual support we had for each other. It worked, and they agreed to help me.
Guilt is a primal social cue, and when used correctly, it can align people's actions with shared values, not just force compliance. We'll explore how guilt works in the brain, the ethical line you shouldn't cross, proven techniques for using guilt effectively, and real-world examples you can start using today.
By the end of this, you'll have a toolbox for turning guilt into a win-win, not a weapon.
So, let's dive into understanding guilt.
What is guilt exactly? It's a self-evaluative emotion that we experience when we've done something wrong, or when we feel we've fallen short of our own standards.
It's different from shame, which is more about our overall sense of self-worth. When we feel guilty, our brain chemistry kicks in, and it's a fascinating process. The amygdala, which is responsible for our emotions, and the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for our decision-making, work together to create a sense of discomfort that nudges us toward reparative action. Oxytocin, often called the love hormone, also plays a role in guilt, as it helps us feel connected to others and want to make things right. What do you think? Have you ever experienced a situation where guilt played a role in your decision-making? So, let's keep unpacking what happens inside our heads when that little knot of guilt starts to form. Imagine you've just missed a deadline for a team project, and you can feel that tightness in your chest. Your amygdala lights up like a warning signal, flagging the situation as emotionally salient. At the same time, the prefrontal cortex begins to weigh the consequences, calculating how your slip-up might affect the group's trust and the overall outcome. The brain doesn't just sit idle. It releases a cocktail of neurochemicals that motivate you to repair the breach. Oxytocin, the hormone usually associated with bonding and trust, nudges you towards seeking reconciliation, while cortisol may keep you alert enough to act quickly. In short, guilt is the brain's built-in reminder system, urging you to restore balance. Now that we have a sense of the physiological backdrop, let's pivot to the ethical dimension. Using guilt as a lever can feel slippery, and that's why it's crucial to draw a clear line between constructive influence and manipulation. Think of it as the difference between a gentle nudge that helps someone align with their own values and a heavy push that forces them against their will. The golden rule here is to ask yourself whether the guilt you're invoking respects the other person's autonomy and whether the desired outcome serves a mutual benefit rather than just your own agenda.
If the answer leans toward selfish coercion, you're stepping into manipulative territory, and that's a path you'll want to avoid.
So how do we stay on the right side of that line while still harnessing the power of guilt? The first technique is what I like to call the reminder of shared commitment. When you notice a colleague hesitating to take on a task, you can subtly bring up a past instance where they stepped up, framing it as a continuation of a shared story rather than a direct demand. For example, you might say, "Remember when we pulled together on the product launch and everyone praised how smoothly it went? I think we could really use that same spirit on this new initiative." By linking the request to a positive memory, you're not shaming them for a shortfall. You're inviting them to live up to a standard they've already set for themselves. A second approach is the future self-appeal. This method taps into the desire to be seen as reliable and trustworthy in the eyes of others, especially one's future self. You could say something like, "If we can get this report finalized today, it will give us the breathing room to focus on the upcoming client meeting, And that's something I know you value as a professional who always delivers on time. Here, you're not pointing a finger at a past mistake. You're painting a picture of a future where the person's reputation is reinforced by the action you're requesting. The third technique involves empathetic framing.
This is perhaps the most delicate, because it requires you to genuinely acknowledge the other person's perspective before introducing the guilt element.
You might begin with, "I understand you've been juggling a lot lately, and I appreciate how hard you've been working." Then, you gently pivot. "I'm feeling a bit stuck because the timeline is tightening, and I'd really value your help to keep things on track." By showing empathy first, you reduce the defensive reaction and make the subsequent guilt cue feel like a shared concern rather than an accusation. Let's bring these ideas to life with a few real-world scenarios you might recognize. Picture a small business owner who needs a supplier to expedite a shipment for an upcoming product launch.
Instead of demanding, they could say, "We've always counted on your reliability to get us through busy seasons.
And that's why I'm reaching out now when we're on the brink of a critical launch."
The supplier feels a gentle pull to honor the established reputation, and the owner avoids sounding demanding.
In a personal context, imagine a partner who wants to spend more quality time together.
Rather than issuing an ultimatum, they could reflect, "I've noticed how much we both value those evenings when we cook together, and I miss that connection. It would mean a lot to me if we could set aside a night each week for that."
The partner is reminded of a shared value, feeling a soft tug of guilt that aligns with their own desire for intimacy. Now, you might be wondering how to gauge whether you're crossing the line into manipulation. One reliable litmus test is to pause and ask, "If I were on the receiving end, would I feel respected?" If the answer is yes, you're likely staying within ethical bounds. If you sense resentment or coercion, it's time to recalibrate. Another useful check is to monitor the outcome over time. Genuine, guilt-inspired actions tend to foster stronger relationships and higher trust, while manipulative tactics often lead to resentment and disengagement. The key is to keep the focus on mutual benefit and to ensure that the other person's agency remains intact. Let's delve a bit deeper into the psychological mechanics behind why these approaches work. When you remind someone of a past positive contribution, you're activating the brain's reward pathways, specifically the ventral striatum, which lights up in response to recalling personal achievements. This creates a sense of pride that can outweigh the discomfort of guilt, making the person more willing to comply. When you appeal to future self-image, you're engaging the prefrontal cortex's planning and self-regulation functions, prompting the individual to consider long-term reputation over short-term convenience. Empathetic framing, on the other hand, triggers the mirror neuron system, fostering a sense of being understood, which lowers defensive barriers and opens the door for cooperative behavior.
You might be thinking, what if the person simply refuses, despite my best-crafted approach?
That's a realistic scenario, and it's important to remember that guilt, like any social lever, isn't a guaranteed switch. It works best when the person already values the relationship and has a history of reciprocal behavior. If the bond is weak or the individual's values diverge sharply from yours, the guilt cue may fall flat or even backfire. In such cases, it's wiser to explore alternative strategies, such as offering tangible incentives or seeking a compromise that meets both parties' core needs. Let's walk through a step-by-step plan you can start applying today. First, identify a goal where you need someone's cooperation. Second, reflect on any shared history or mutual values that connect you to that person. Third, choose the technique reminder of shared commitment, future self-appeal, or empathetic framing that best fits the context. Fourth, script a concise, authentic statement that incorporates the chosen technique, making sure to express genuine appreciation for the other person's past contributions. Fifth, deliver the message with calm confidence, maintaining eye contact and open body language. Finally, observe the response and be ready to adapt.
If the person seems receptive, reinforce their positive action with sincere gratitude, which will further cement the collaborative dynamic.
To illustrate, let's say you're leading a community volunteer project and need a key member to take on a logistics role.
You could start by saying, "I really admire how you organized the fundraiser last year, and the team still talks about how smoothly everything ran.
We're gearing up for the upcoming food drive, and your knack for coordinating would make a huge difference.
Would you be willing to help us map out the distribution plan?
Notice how the statement blends a reminder of past success with a clear, future-oriented request, all wrapped in genuine appreciation.
The volunteer is likely to feel a subtle sense of duty anchored in pride, not shame, and will be more inclined to step up.
Another practical example. You're negotiating a deadline extension with a client who's been a long-time partner. You might say, "Over the past years, we've built a relationship based on delivering high-quality results on schedule, and I value that trust deeply. To ensure we maintain that standard for the upcoming release, I'd like to propose a brief extension that will allow us to fine-tune the final product. How does that sound?" Here, you're reinforcing the shared value of quality, invoking the client's own commitment to excellence, and presenting the extension as a collaborative decision rather than a unilateral demand. Now that you have a toolbox of techniques, let's talk about how to refine your skill over time.
Start by practicing in low-stakes situations. Maybe ask a friend for a small favor using one of the approaches and observe the reaction.
Keep a mental log of what works and what feels forced. As you gain confidence, you can apply the methods to more significant scenarios, always staying attuned to the other person's feedback. Remember, the goal isn't to become a master manipulator, but to become a more empathetic communicator who can align others' actions with shared values in a respectful way.
Before we wrap up, I want to hear from you.
Think back to a moment when you felt guilty and chose to act in a way that repaired a relationship or achieved a goal.
How did that experience shape your view of guilt as a motivating force? Share your story in the comments, and let's learn from each other's journeys.